Okay, so the reason we're making this video is because I thought it was a crazy idea, but it's one that honestly kind of makes a bit more sense now than it did, like, a few weeks ago, maybe even a few months ago. Today we're talking about the Ottawa Senators, and we're going over to their defense core. It's been no secret that the entire priority that the team appears to have when it comes to trades has been for a defenseman. Jakob Chychrun has been on the block, and he's been the number one guy linked to the Sens for quite a while now. And with the events of yesterday's game between the Senators and the Flyers, we may start to see just a tad more desperation out of Ottawa the next coming while. This is why this idea was brought up, and I wanted to give a big shout out to Derek Lee on Twitter, who actually went out there and mentioned this in the first place. He is a prospect analyst at Future Watch TV. He's a pretty good follow. He talks about Sens stuff. But before we get into the main idea I wanted to talk about, we have to go over what happened yesterday in Philadelphia first, because Thomas Chabot, pretty good defenseman who plays on the Ottawa Senators, ended up going into the boards really hard off of a hit by Travis Konecny. This was a pretty nasty hit. The guy left the game, and unfortunately there was no call. It was right in the numbers there. Chabot was down on the ice, and as a result, I mean, it's really easy to say that there's probably going to be some desperation here from Ottawa because, yeah, you were already kind of in a precarious spot with the standings. You were looking for a defenseman this entire time, and now your best defenseman got taken out. This is what Elliotte Friedman said on the intermission, that a potential Thomas Chabot long-term injury could accelerate Dorian's attempt in trying to acquire a defenseman. He was already looking around the league before the Chabot injury. This is why, when you go over onto Derek Lee's Twitter and see what he said yesterday before the Philadelphia game even happened, this conversation and the replies below are something that I felt was interesting enough to read about on the channel. Alright, Derek says, how much would it cost to reacquire Erik Karlsson? Now, if you search Erik Karlsson's name on Twitter, you would have found clips from Friday's game, the San Jose Sharks versus the Dallas Stars, where Karlsson was absolutely having his way with the Stars on the Stars' blue line. He was dangling by guys, going through the legs and forcing it to open spaces. The guy is an absolute maniac. And we've been talking this entire time that he's got so many freaking goals. He's one of the top point producers in the entire NHL. And he's a defenseman on a team that pretty much is near the bottom of the league. They're trying to tank for Bedard. Erik Karlsson is single-handedly ruining the tank because of how many freaking goals the guy scores. Lo and behold, Erik Karlsson's name has been tossed around in trade rumors because if the San Jose Sharks really want to go the Bedard route, they really want to go through a rebuild, a guy like Erik Karlsson is a very good player, and even though his contract is huge, there is significant value there for any team that's trying to acquire literally the top scoring defenseman in the NHL right now. In 16 games played, the guy has 21 points, 10 goals, 11 assists. He's on pace for 51 goals and 107 points. Now, I'm not going to guarantee that Erik Karlsson does or does not get 100 points. He's probably not going to get 50 goals, but I don't know, weirder things have happened, I guess. But Erik Karlsson is still making 11.5 AAV till the end of 2027. The contract kind of sucks. He's 32 years old, meaning that he'll be 37 once this contract is said and done. And, I mean, this has been the first season in a while where Karlsson has really shown off that he is an absolute beast. No questions asked, no doubts about it. He is a monster. He just wasn't the same when playing in the shared spotlight of Brent Burns. And so, with the Ottawa Senators and their hunt for a defenseman, preferably on the right side now that Thomas Chabot is injured, and with Erik Karlsson being right there, I wonder what the conversations go like when you think about the idea of Karlsson going back to Ottawa. Going back over to Derek's tweet, there are some replies that I do think are interesting. Eli says that I don't think it's going to happen, but I'll humor you. If San Jose doesn't retain salary, it won't cost much. If they retain 50%, it will be similar to the return for Brent Burns. Phillips Head says that new ownership and Alfredson as president first, before Karlsson would even consider a trade back. Maddie says, hey, if you take Karlsson's horrible contract, 50% retained, or 40% at the minimum, or package him with Timo Meier, then we're going to start talking. Beyond that, I wouldn't touch Karlsson back to Ottawa. I'm sure the cost would be a DeBrincat-type return and a young B-level defenseman prospect, and that just doesn't seem like a trade Dorian would win, in my opinion. And then, of course, there's the entire argument asking whether or not the Sharks would even want to trade a guy like Karlsson away in the first place. We know the team is bad, and they're, for all intents and purposes, let's just say they're tanking. I know nobody goes out there and intentionally tries to lose, but the team has been losing a lot. So for Erik Karlsson, there is the idea where it's like, okay, you have Timo Meier, you have Karlsson. If you get Bedard next year, who's probably going to be like a 50-point player right away, and he could be even better than that. I'm just trying to go absolutely conservative estimate right there. You could become competitive really quickly if Erik Karlsson remains this good, and you get Connor Bedard and all the other young guys. William Eklund becomes a stud right away too. You could turn this thing around if you really decided to do so. But if you don't want to do that, you want to wait a little bit longer, you want to give Connor Bedard or Braden Yeager or Adam Fantilli, whoever it is that you get in the 2023 draft, just a bit more time before they need to be the best player on the team, then okay, trade Karlsson away right now, get yourselves a few picks, etc., etc. And if Ottawa is the team that might be involved here more so than others, sign me up for that, baby. Honestly, it would be so weird having Karlsson and Stützle and Norris all on the same team, just from an outsider hockey fan's point of view. Like, imagine playing with all these dudes that you were traded for. That's kind of weird. Imagine coming back home to Ottawa. No more Mike Hoffman here anymore. So there you go. That's a really big thorn in the Karlsson family's side that's going to be removed. Yeah, don't think I forgot about that one, Sens fans. I think most people remember the crazy story between Erik Karlsson and Mike Hoffman and their spouses. It was wild. But either way, with the Ottawa Senators and the summer of Dorian coming in here, I mean, you look at the standings and you see how bad they are, but you look at the games and you acknowledge how capable they are at the same time. This is not a team that is losing games because they're just piss poor bad. They're losing games because the brief moments in time where they don't play their best, they end up getting scored against. All those recent losses, 1-goal losses, if not 2-goal losses with an empty net included, so pretty much 1-goal losses. If the Ottawa Senators just got 1 or 2 extra saves or 1 or 2 extra goals, they'd be a lot better than absolute dead last in the Atlantic Division right now. The Sens have not been lucky with the way the cookies have crumbled. And you could say, oh, it's the coach's fault, fire Dorian, whatever, we know this roster is better than this, but at the end of the day, acquiring a defenseman like Erik Karlsson definitely won't make your team any worse. In fact, the summer of Dorian, I was actually a really big believer in. DeBrincat, Giroux, you still have all the other guys you had beforehand. You added Talbot, you got rid of Murray. How about adding Erik Karlsson? That's the ultimate icing on the cake now, isn't it? And plus, you guys are in the market for a D-man anyway. If there is some sort of salary retained or whatever, it would be like Karlsson never left. Really, like, depending on the return, whatever defenseman or whatever, I don't know, monetary asset is added on from the Ottawa side to San Jose, alongside of the additional salary retained, maybe things get really, really tight for the cap situation there in Ottawa, but at the end of the day, I mean, fantasy booking, fantasy trades, people are going to go out there and they're going to start talking because you were in the market for Chychrun for so long, but that trade still hasn't been accomplished yet, that just go a state over into California, and maybe you have your ultimate prize sitting right there in the teal, white, and black sweater. Start with the comments your thoughts about the idea of Ottawa reacquiring Erik Karlsson. What do you think the return could be like? There were a few mentions of Brent Burns and his trade situation being a comparable there. You gotta remember, what did Brent Burns get traded for? He got traded for Steven Lorenz, Eetu Makanyemi, and a third. That was it. It wasn't that big of a return, so I could understand if somebody would be willing to bite on that really hard. Alex DeBrincat's name was also thrown around as a potential trade package comparable, and DeBrincat cost a top 10 pick in the most recent draft, so we'll see if the Ottawa Senators are willing to shell out anything like that. Hey, you know what I'm thinking? If the Ottawa Senators wanted to say, hey, you know, we're pretty down there in the standings, our first-round pick for 2023 is going to be pretty valuable, want to take it? And then they trade for a guy like Karlsson, and then they start winning, and that first-round pick goes lower and lower and lower on the draft rankings. It's like the reverse Erik Karlsson trade version 1 with Tim Stützle, because that trade was the 3rd overall pick that eventually got swapped over, and it wasn't really supposed to be 3rd overall because nobody thought San Jose would be that bad in 2019-20. Ton of the comments, your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this video. 99, and bye.